Okay, moment of truth. Can everybody hear me? The latency should be way down, so you should be able to respond pretty quickly. I'm guessing people can't hear me. All right, hang on. I gotta screw around with the microphone. Okay, good. You can't hear us. Okay. So excellent. Thank you. So this is the JEMJAMMER Dungeon Master Q&A type thing. The last time we did this was right around after episode 3, so it's been a hot minute. I'm just going to safely assume that everyone here knows who I am and that I don't need to explain what my association is with the JEMJAMMER podcast, but the short version is, hi, I'm Kit. I play everyone who's not the main characters. So I figure the way we're going to tackle this is I will go through the questions that people sent in ahead of time, just to be fair to the people who did their homework early, and then I can probably take some questions from the chat. If you just chuck them in whenever you feel like it, I can scroll back and see if I can sift through them, just to reduce the amount of time I'm sitting here waiting for questions to come in, because network latency is a thing. So Nanashi Jones asks, what is your personal DM approach? I use an approach that I like to call campfires in the dark, with regards to plotting, which is to say that there are campfires, individual plot points, that I want the players to get to eventually and that I have planned out. But when the players get to those and in what order they do them is entirely up to them. And I find that this provides a pretty good balance of giving the players a chance to feel like they have free will and affect the story, while also giving me a chance to prepare stuff in advance and not have to just wing it every session. So Christina Woods asks, what's your favorite RPG system to run? How about to play in? When it comes to running things, I like to play around with different rule sets. I don't think I've found my favorite yet. I've had a lot of fun with the Doctor Who RPG, which I may have mentioned on another live stream like this. And I'm currently looking at the Star Trek RPG, although hang on, I'll show you guys how dense this thing is. This is the Star Trek RPG base rulebook. It is this thick. You could beat goats to death with this thing. The mailman dropped this in front of my door, and I thought somebody had died. So it's rather complex, but I do want to try it out at some point, just because, Star Trek. And I'm a huge nerd, and I've loved Star Trek forever. I've also played a game in a system called Prowlers and Paragons, which is a D6-based system that is as indicated by the name, is a superhero RPG. I played around with that a bit, and I kind of like the free-form nature of it, especially when it comes to superhero narratives. And there's a bunch of smaller ones like Honey Heist that I've goofed around with that I really enjoyed. At my job, I ran 2 Honey Heists. And both of them were the same one, but with different groups, because too many people signed up, and I wasn't running a Honey Heist with 10 people. I refused. And that was a lot of fun. So Saturn asks, in your opinion, what are some of the unspoken rules one shouldn't break for games like D&D? I think a big one for a player is probably don't try to fuck with somebody else's fun. If somebody else is really enjoying the role-playing aspect, don't wade in with your murder hobo bullshit. And if someone is really having fun with their murder hobo bullshit, maybe wait for a while before you get into your soap opera stuff. When it comes to a rule for the DM, I would say, whenever possible, try not to take autonomy away from the player. Don't take ownership of the character away from the player. Bear asks, how do you handle PC deaths? I've been lucky enough not to have killed any of my players yet. But in terms of how I would theoretically handle it, it depends on the rule set. For something that's a little rules light but narrative heavy, like Prowlers and Paragons or Doctor Who, my general rule is players shouldn't die, or at least players should have control over whether they die. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they just get to handwave consequences for things, but most games provide an out in terms of unconsciousness or taking them out of the story or something else that is not death. And at a point where a character could potentially die, whether they've been knocked unconscious or in like Monster of the Week, run out of luck or things like that, I generally ask the player if they want a dramatic death scene, because some players do. Some players are really into that. I have not had a character die on me yet, even in the Tomb of Horrors run where I played a kobold. But like I'm a sucker for a good dramatic death scene, and also I'm incredibly fickle and get bored of my characters easily. So killing them off solves a problem. Oh, we got a Pam in the background. Hey, kitty. She might be coming over here. So yeah, for rules light, narrative heavy games like that, that's the approach I generally prefer. For rules heavy systems like D&D, where there are very strict rules around death, I would generally err on the side of having the consequence be real. You may have noticed that I gave the players at the start of the JEMJAMMER campaign an out with regards to character death. They still have those rings; those have not gone off; those don't expire. So it's basically one get out of jail free card for each of them when it comes to character death. But I generally, again, if a character death is under stupid circumstances, I'm inclined to be a little more lenient when it comes to things like resurrection. Whereas if it's dramatically appropriate, that's a conversation that I would have with the players. Like, do you want to be resurrected, or do you want this to be the end of the character story? Because some players are into that. They are into having their characters die and have permanent consequences like that. Javi asks, do you approve of players' characters starting a romantic relationship? Does it end up affecting the story in any way? Well, in this game, I think my answer is going to be pretty clear. I am 100% in favor of player romances. Generally speaking, I think that consent is a very important thing. So, for example, if there is going to be a character flirting with another character, the players should talk that out ahead of time, so it's not surprising. And if a relationship does get more intense, that again should be a conversation between the players. When it comes to romances between players and NPCs, that's also a conversation we usually have ahead of time. In the case of JEMJAMMER, it was more in the case of JEMJAMMER, it wasn't necessarily an explicit conversation we had ahead of time, but it was made very clear that like monster boyfriends would be a feature of the campaign for Annie, for example. And I just sort of roll with, various NPCs. Certain NPCs will be designed to be love interests. For example, I put Chastity directly in Cacophony's path on purpose, and I put Thizita in Cacophony's path on purpose, and I put Max in Juliana's path on purpose. Lachlan was kind of an oops. Lachlan was just going to be basically an extra, but the art I picked for him was too hot, and here we are. I do think that if you're a player and you're going to be flirting with NPCs, you do need to check in with your DM beforehand. For example, I was playing a game where it was me and like 5 dudes, and we did not check in beforehand whether flirting with NPCs was going to be a thing. And as a result, the game became an excuse for like the 4 guys who weren't my brother to sexually harass me on the regular, and that wasn't fun. And it wasn't necessarily they were doing something they were doing out of malice. It was just what they wanted out of a D&D game, and that I had not I had not signed on for, and it wasn't necessarily fun. That game did not that game fell apart very quickly. Also, it fell apart because I was living in a small apartment and I did not want 5 dudes in their 20s hanging around. They kept breaking my dishes. I wanted them to leave. Let's see. Abel asks, any tips to avoid creating world building scenarios that you will never end up using for the campaign? No. I have repeatedly come up with NPC ideas that are really interesting and deep, and then the players never encounter those NPCs. I have repeatedly come up with like worlds and locations that are really cool that the players have never gone to. I am a very broad world builder when it comes to this kind of stuff. Like easily 80% of the stuff I write does not end up in the show. So I have no tips. I only have my condolences and my understanding to offer you. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Nanashi Jones asks, how do you make Roll20 behave? With difficulty. For a while there, the peer-to-peer audio wasn't working very well. Like, it would cycle through and try to form a connection, and then if it didn't form a connection with somebody, it would just decide that person wasn't in the game and banish them to the Shadow Realm. So yeah, it's rather difficult and unwieldy, and I mostly just use it for the numbers side of things when it comes to actually storing my notes and keeping track of anything important. I use World Anvil instead. Roll20 is just for the math. Also, it doesn't play nice with Firefox. I've had to use it almost exclusively with Chrome, especially if I want to use video or voice. Saturn asks, what are your thoughts on homebrew material? Is there a limit to how much homebrew a DM should use or allow in the campaign? I think it depends on the homebrew material. Like, that's because homebrew is a lot like fan fiction, which is to say that there is no editorial process. Some of it's really, really good. Some of it's not very good at all, and you just kind of have to sift through and figure out what's worth using. Generally speaking, I will take a look at the homebrew material before I approve its use and check whether it's going to do things like screw up the game balance or not fit with the world concept. Although with Spelljammer, there's really nothing that doesn't fit with the world concept. Basically anything that could cause difficulty and screw up the game. I don't necessarily worry about if something is too OP. If a player's, because for one thing, if you multi-class into Rogue, Hexblade, Warlock, and Fighter, you can delete one, or sorry, Rogue, Hexblade, Warlock, and Paladin, you can delete one boss fight from the game per short rest. So, generally speaking, the game is already unbalanced and certain builds are already too OP. I just have to modify my challenge ratings around that to compensate, and that usually means adding more hit points to a boss if necessary. So yeah, my general rule is take a look at it first. See if it's going to screw up the concept. If it doesn't, go with rule of fun. If it looks fun, go with it. If it looks like something that's going to be a nightmare to manage, like the various attempts at bringing Scions into 5th edition, maybe advise your player that this is not going to be fun to play. And then sometimes they won't listen to you, and they'll try it anyway. And then a couple of sessions in, they'll be like, this is a nightmare, and you'd perform a mercy kill on that character and let them roll a new one. Space King Bobby asks, who would you cast in a live-action television series? This could probably be its own episode. I will let my players on their own feeds and forms of communication decide who would play them in a theoretical TV series or movie. But as far as I'm concerned, the ideal people to be playing these characters are already playing them. This is a story that works best as an RPG. I know we have this cultural thing where like a story we love isn't real until it's gotten the full Hollywood treatment, but some things are already in their ideal format, and I think JEMJAMMER is one of them. That said, I do have face claims and reference pictures that I use for certain characters, like certain real-life celebrities I will use as like my mental picture for an NPC. So, for example, Captain Bondar is Buffy St. Marie circa like the late 90s when she was like in her 50s, 60s. And then Kara is specifically Keira Knightley in the second and third Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Most of my NPC folder is hot women. I will leave it to you to decide why that is. Hint, it's because I'm gay. Saturn asks, how was dual DMing during the crossover with Fallen Gods? Were there any complications to go through with it? Well, for one thing, it ran a lot longer than it was supposed to. It was supposed to be 2 sessions. Session 1 DM'd by Alan with me guesting, and then session 2 DM'd by me with Alan guesting. That didn't work out. Mine ran really long. So mine ended up being had to be split into 2 episodes because we ran for like 2 to 3 hours. It was like midnight by the time we were finishing up. There were a couple of people who were like, look, just kill my character and get it over with. Like, my mom had to stay over that night because she was in my apartment for that particular episode. It ran too long. I should have. I did not anticipate that they were going to spend an hour trying to figure out how to kill the dragon. I should have, though, because I have listened to both of these shows. So yeah, it ran long, and it ended up being Alan, me, and then Alan again at the end. So that was a big difficulty. Collaboration-wise, it was actually pretty easy. Alan and I would email each other back and forth our various ideas. We did a couple of video calls to figure out what the main plot would be and how it would play out. He would warn me about some of his players' habits. I warned him about some of my players' habits. But overall, it worked out pretty well. I really enjoyed doing it. The only reason we haven't done it again is because A, the scheduling problems, and B, we got sidetracked pretty hard with our Halloween special. And that kind of, by the time that was over with, I was like, I have to get us back on the crit path or we will never get there. So I would be open to doing so again. And I have some ideas. I'm sure Alan does too. Who is the NPC? Nanashi Jones asks, who is the NPC you're currently happiest with? And who is the biggest pain in your butt, but still worth it? I would say Mr. Hurst is always really fun to play, and I like that the players responded to him in the way that I was hoping, which is to say they were immediately like, we love this hippo man. I would say that for reasons that I can't disclose, Captain Bondar is always rather difficult to play because there is a boundary inside of her head that I keep bumping up against, and I have to be careful around and I can't show my hand too early, but I also can't be like entirely obtuse about it. And also it's really fun playing Lachlan. It's really fun just awkwardly flirting with Annie. Like, a lot of my characters are really smooth, so Lachlan being, an awkward mess is a nice change of pace for me. Moylan John asks, how many dads/mentor figures will Alviva have by the end of this campaign? Well, many. Even I don't know how many dads she will pick up by the end of the campaign, but I know for a fact that there will be more. There are many dads waiting in the wings. And I'm very excited for you to meet some of them. Saturn asks, if your mother returned to the game, would she have her own new character? Would she regain control of Alviva? I would not have invited Alexi to the game if I thought there was a possibility of my mother coming back to it. My mom quit the game because of disability issues that do not go away. They are permanent. They are degenerative. And like she's not coming back. And I would not have invited Alexi to take over the character if I thought there was the remotest possibility that she would have to give the character up again. That would be extraordinarily shitty of me, and I would not want to do that. So I guess the answer is I challenge your premise. She's not coming back. Alviva would not change players again. Yeah, it's not a problem. Moylan John asks, how many monster boyfriends will Jill have by the end? Honestly, I'm worried about overwhelming poor Jill, so I'm mostly going to stick with 2 for now, with the possibility of there's the possibility of future opportunities along the way, but I'm pretty sure she's not going to take them, and that those characters aren't really going to push. That said, I like having hot monster characters in my campaign, so even if they don't become Jill's boyfriends, they are going to be there to torment many a player. Nanashi Jones asks, what uniquely Spelljammer concept, monster, magical item, etc. do you want to fit in but haven't found the right spot for yet? I've mostly in my long-term planning documents, I've mostly found a spot for everything that I'm genuinely interested in. In terms of stuff that's uniquely Spelljammer, excuse me, there's the Spelljammer itself. The Spelljammer is the name of a Flying Dutchman type legendary ship that honestly, if you look it up in the books, it's I don't know what you're supposed to do with this. It's sort of like in Planescape, those planes that you could go to that would kill you instantly. It's like, how am I supposed to work this into the campaign? If the player dies when they go there, why would I send them there? So the Spelljammer has a gas, I guess you could say, in the atmosphere that effectively hypnotizes anyone exposed to it and makes them want to stay on the Spelljammer forever. It's basically one of those. It's like if you fuck up in a Sierra like adventure game and pick the option that leads to you dying or being sealed in a vault forever or whatever. I don't know how you're supposed to use this, and I'm not going to. I'm not going to bother. Moylan John asks, which adopted / rehomed NPC is each player's fave, each character's? I will leave, again, that to my players to respond to on their own feeds. But in terms of my favorites, I'm quite fond of Dewey, which I can safely say because he's not one of mine. So I like that he's on the ship. I hope that I'm playing him true to form, because Chris did a really good job playing that character. And yeah, I like, at first I was kind of annoyed at the number of mascots building up on the ship, but at this point I'm just going to lean into it. There's plenty of mascots on the ship. There will be more mascots, I can promise you this. And you just imagine me standing next to the Kestrel, patting it on the top and saying, this baby can fit so many mascots in it. Nanashi Jones asks, biggest oh shit moment for you as a TM? I mean, I think you guys know my answer to that. It was when the party failed 2 stealth checks in a row trying to sneak up on the White Manor, and I couldn't figure out how they were going to get like there without dying. And then Rio, who is brilliant, decided that Artie was just going to walk up to the front door and say hi. So that kind of recovered it for me. Which kind of leads into our next question. Moylan John asks, which off-the-cuff scene did you enjoy DMing the most? Definitely Cacophony charming her way through the White Manor. I was not prepared for this at all. I had mostly figured that this would be a combat thing. I don't plan this thing so much assuming that the players will do anything. What I will do is I will set up a scenario that has multiple possible solutions and see what the players come up with. So, for example, the White Manor had a certain population of guards. And all at once, those guards were a deadly encounter. But if the players managed to pick them off one by one or in groups, it was much more manageable combat-wise. Or they could try and sneak in and avoid the guards entirely. Those were the possible solutions that I was anticipating. I was not anticipating that Cacophony would basically turn them all into her fanboys and then kite them into the next encounter that I had planned, resulting in me playing D&D by myself. But God, it was brilliant, and I really enjoyed it. Saturn asks, has there been anything cut from the episodes that you would have liked to have made it through? Not really. There's certain things I wish had been cut, like me fucking up who's on the ship, who's on deck, who's driving it, and whether the ship is moving in episode like 4. But that stayed in. But I can understand that there was probably a way. There was no way to cut that where it made sense and still made me look like a good GM. So it is what it is. Most of the like side comedy stuff that the table chatter that doesn't necessarily work in the narrative of the episode ends up in the stingers anyway. If none of you guys listen past the credits, you should, because that's where all the really good cut stuff goes. Jake is usually really good at identifying the kind of stuff that like doesn't necessarily fit with the episode, but is really, really funny, so it should stay in somewhere. Moylan John asks, what's the highest costume change count for Cacophony in an episode? Can it be topped? I think it's Space Prom, because she had like 5 of those layered on top of each other. And statistically speaking, I'm not sure we've gotten to a higher count since, but I believe in Mackenzie, and I believe in her ability to have even more costume changes than that in an episode. We just have to wait for it to happen, and I will do my best to give her the opportunity to pull it off. Moylan John asks, which NPC do the players think is most likely to turn out to be some sort of big bad? I am actually very interested to find this out from the players on their own feeds. If only so I can either laugh maniacally or panic because I've been rumbled. Annie rumbled me on Max being a secret prince basically immediately, which was a lot of fun. like she figured it out way ahead of when Jilliana did. But of course you can't mix character knowledge with player knowledge. by the way, in the show itself, if Jilliana pretends not to understand something, it's not because Annie doesn't understand. Annie's very quick on the uptake and she knows stories. It's because she's trying to play Jilliana as a realistic character who does not know she's in a D&D campaign, especially a D&D campaign run by someone she's been known for like 10 years. DAO Fac says, or Dow Fac maybe, says, what kind of peanut butter goes best with your jammer? Crunchy, no further comment. Space King Bobby asks, what will be your character's favorite fall activities for the players? I will again leave that for them to answer on their own feeds. There are no seasons in space. A lot of my characters don't have fall activities because fall is a meaningless concept to them. They land on a planet and sometimes it's a bit colder and the leaves are on the ground, but that usually just means you have to wear heavier clothes and listen to other people complain about pumpkin spice. Moylan John asks, what are your character's fave foods? Mr. Hurst is really fond of that fine chocolate that Cacophony gave him. And he's been trying to figure out how to ask her where to find it ever since. I haven't really put much thought into any of the other characters. When I come up with the characters, the Facebook quiz answers are not something that I take into account very much. I'm sorry. But I will leave for the players. I will leave that for them to answer on their own feeds. Christina Woods asks, what's something you've loved so far about running JEMJAMMER? I love how much I can just wind the players up and watch them go. They're all very creative people, and they have a very good sense of where they want their characters to go. And therefore, some of my favorite episodes are the ones where they're just on the ship hashing out their character shit. I also love the enthusiasm with which the players have identified my bullshit and thrown themselves into it. Like the moment it was mentioned that Harena was a desert planet, my players were all like, oh shit, we're doing the Mummy, and immediately threw themselves into it, and really leaned into the whole shit. I also like that they're even less experienced role players among them, they recognize a plot hook when they see it. To the point where I will accidentally have plot hooks in there that I have to gently dissuade the players from taking. For example, they are not leveled for Max's possible reascent to the throne of the Vidoni Commonwealth. If they had attempted to go with him, they probably would have died, just because the things waiting for them there are too powerful for a bunch of like level 5 players to handle. But I am looking forward to when they do get there, because I have some really fun stuff planned. And Christina Woods asks, read anything good recently? On the original fiction side, I've been reading the first Crazy Rich Asians book, which is turning out to be a lot of fun. A lot of footnotes in that one, though, just because, you know, there's a lot of Hokkien and Mandarin and Cantonese and all sorts of different things that need to be translated to the average idiot Western reader. I've also, my friend Lee recently sold me like all of his Hellboy comics for $50. I've read all of them, but I haven't owned all of them before, so now I'm working my way through them again. Volume 1 is really rough. Volume 2, they had started to figure out their shit. So that's what I've been reading on the original fiction side, and then on the fan fiction side, I've been on a real person of interest kick, which unfortunately, it was not a big fandom even in its heyday. I think it's got like less than 10,000 fics on AO3. Which unfortunately means that I've gone through all the good ones, and now I'm just desperately, I'm like the cat that's eaten the goldfish, and now I'm just pawing at the empty bowl. They're like, no, there must be more. And there isn't, regrettably. But, so that's my reading bullshit. So any questions from the chat as we've finished up the advanced questions? I'll give you guys, oh, here we go. Any chance of Finn having a major role in a future arc? Finn is from Toril. He's from the Forgotten Realms setting, and I'm not terribly fond of doing anything in the Forgotten Realms setting, if only because JEMJAMMER takes place 200 years in the future of present-day D&D timeline. So I would have to make a lot of guesses as to where things are going, and my immediate instinct would be to blow stuff up. Which would, I'm sure, displease a lot of people who are actually into Forgotten Realms who watch the show. That said, I would not be averse to having Finn have a storyline. The only problem that I run into is that at his current stats, he has 4 hit points. So I would have to beef him up significantly if he were going to leave the ship, because leaving the ship makes him a red shirt otherwise. But there can definitely be Finn shenanigans afoot at some point during the campaign. We got a lot of campaign to go. I know we're 50 episodes in, but we're nowhere near even the midpoint of what I have planned out. Any other questions? I'm seeing a comment here for I think this has to do with Alviva's dads, and it's like, I hope at least a couple are just remarkably wise animals she chats with. No comment. Saturn is asking, how hard would it be to transition a regular D&D game into a JEMJAMMER game? Well, it wouldn't be a JEMJAMMER game, but it could be a Spelljammer game, and not particularly difficult, honestly. The nature of Spelljammer is that it is generally assumed that most campaign worlds have some kind of spelljamming traffic, even if the locals are not aware of it. There are secret coves, there are hidden spaceports, there are just like Star Trek style people coming down, checking out the planet, realizing there's nothing there, and leaving again. And most honestly, the way you could easily do it is do it the same way that I did it, which is just have your players come across a crashed spell sailor or a crashed spelljamming ship, and then take it out and see what happens. The advice that I would give you is to give a reason for your players to want to stay out in space besides space is cool. Ideally, you want to tie it to your character's characterization. One of the difficulties that I ran into when I was running this campaign is that normally when I run a D&D campaign, I ask my players to do some homework and give me certain things that are unresolved in their characters' backstories. And then I weave those into the ongoing plot of the world so that the players feel more connected to the things that are happening. In this, because the characters were all groundlings, I couldn't have their backstories factor in that much with space, with the exception of Alviva, because, you know, my mom and then going on Alexi handed me the whole unknown origin orphan thing on a silver platter, and I had to do something with that. So I can't quite tie in the backstories as much, but I did still do my best to motivate the characters to want to stay in space. So, for example, for Jill, I made it personal by burning down the Temple of Ethla because I'm mean like that. For Cacophony, I made sure to dangle the possibility of romance with various dragon hybrid species. For Alviva, I offered answers. For Arturos, it's mostly he's running from something. He has no motivation to go back home. So it's rather easy to keep him in space. By the way, he has plot coming up. We've recorded some of the Arturos plot, but yeah, he's got plot coming up, and I had to make sure he had something to do in Stormhaven while everybody else was doing their personal quest stuff. It would have been unfair otherwise. So yeah, give your players a reason to stay in space and just drop a Spelljammer in their lap and see what happens. Heck yeah, Fishboy Spotlight. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that. Because Artie's been on the cast for a while. We have to do something with his backstory eventually. Any further questions? I'm assuming Bear is one of the folks in your is one of the folks in your D&D group, Saturn. What Bear asks, what do you think about the mess of a system that Shadowrun has, if you have knowledge about it? I have not personally played a lot of Shadowrun. I have played the Shadowrun like PC games, which I had some fun with, but it is a very grindy, crunchy system. Overall, like I like the world a lot. I like the concept a lot. I'm not terribly fond of the rule set. I even have a friend who he decided he was going to run a Shadowrun campaign, but instead of using the Shadowrun rules, he just hacked the Powered by the Apocalypse system into being Shadowrun, which, near as I can tell, is working out remarkably well. So yeah, if you like the world of Shadowrun but don't want to deal with the rules, there's ways around that. You can just nobody can tell you what to do. You can just defy everything and decide you're going to use different rules instead. Powered by the Apocalypse is good for that. I don't know if Fate would be particularly good for that. But yeah, there's other rule systems that you can adapt for use with Shadowrun. I see a comment here to the effect of, sounds like guest DMs running long is something of a thing. Yeah, we did not expect, Chris was not expecting us to be as stupid as we were with regards to the great big dungeon castle. I'm hopeless at puzzles at all. Don't put a puzzle in front of me as a player because I will be completely useless at it. If you watch the Roll for Severity stream at all, like, my character is supposed to be reasonably intelligent, but if you put a puzzle in front of, like, Kit the human person, I got nothing. I spent an inordinate amount of time trying to decode a string of letters that we had found that turned out to just be a bunch of individual words for numbers. And I thought it was like maybe in code or maybe an anagram or another language or something like that. It just, yeah. So that was a problem with the Halloween special, is that we took way longer than we were supposed to. When Chris pitched the idea to me, he was like, "Oh, it shouldn't take much longer than 2 to 3 hours," and I think we were in there for like 6 to 8. It was a lot of fun though, and it was fun having somebody else DM. I knew a certain amount of what was gonna happen, like was going to transpire in the castle, but also I had the excuse of playing Mr. Hurst, who Mr. Hurst is not a dumb character. He has very specialized knowledge because of his upbringing as a Gith, but he doesn't have a lot of practical knowledge with regards to certain things, and he's not particularly quick on the uptake. So I could, even when I knew when something was an obvious trap, Mr. Hurst could just blunder through because he's Mr. Hurst, and that's what people love about him. Crest is asking, Roll for Severity. Yeah, I am on another D&D stream called Roll for Severity. It's twitch.tv/Roll for Severity. I'm in the Scoundrels campaign. They alternate between 2 different campaigns. So like week 1, it'll be Ominous Giggles campaign. And then week 2, it'll be the Scoundrels campaign, which is DM'd by Miss Wolfinger. I play an utterly shitbag rogue named Dominic, or Nick for short. He is basically every con man from every like 30s crime movie rolled into one. Rio recently did art of him that was incredibly good. And I have a lot of fun playing that game, especially since I built a character around conning and lying to people, and my 2 co-party members are a war cleric who believes that he has a lot of stuff going on, but one of his things is that he is a cleric of a god of war and death, so he is rather enthusiastic when it comes to fighting stuff. And then we also have an artificer who is appears to have a compulsion with just taking stuff. We ended up with like 60 Everburn torches in a bag just because he figured it would be a good idea to have them, and you know what? It was. They came in handy. So yeah, if you want to check that out, that's like every Sunday at like 6 o'clock my time, which is Mountain Time, so that's like 5 o'clock Pacific, if I'm doing the directions correctly. But yeah, that game's a lot of fun. Andrew Dooley asks, is there anything, monster, character, magic item, etc., from a non-Spelljammer setting you're itching to drop into JEMJAMMER? I'm really fond of Planescape, and I have so far put like hints of planar stuff into the campaign. It is my ambition that when the players get more powerful and gain access to spells like Plane Shift, that there are certain plot points that happen not on the material plane that do require going to the outer planes in specific. And I'm looking forward to doing that. And I haven't found a place for it yet, but at some point I want to send the players to Sigil just because it's fun. So yeah, mostly Planescape stuff. I'm not terribly fond of the campaign settings that are just like your Greyhawks, your Forgotten Realms. I don't have the childhood association with Dragonlance that Alan and Annie do, so I'm not as fond of it. I like going there because Alan's group is there, and that's fun, but I don't have an attachment to the setting itself. I like the settings that are a bit weird. So I like the Spelljammers. I like the Planescapes. I'm not super into Eberron, but I've been meaning to read more about it, especially since Lachlan's from there. And somebody's going to ask him some very pointed questions at some point, and I should be ready for it. So yeah, but the thing that I want to drop into JEMJAMMER is mostly from Planescape. Concepts especially. I'm going to at some point really get into the nitty-gritty of what makes a god. We got into it a little bit with the Zeta, and it was really fun having that bounce off Juliana. But it's gonna get weird and conceptual at some point, and I hope you guys enjoy that because I certainly will. Are there any one-shots of other games or systems that you'd want to do with the Jam Buns aside from Star Trek, since you mentioned that? Funny you should ask. We recently hit the Patreon goal for me doing a Doctor Who one-shot live stream. That was going to be pretty soon, but unfortunately, I work for a living, and I got like 5 different assignments dumped into my lap that are all due this weekend, so that's going to have to be pushed back. I want to do Star Trek at some point. Whether that's with the Jam crew or whether that's with a different crew, either way, I want to do it. The Jam crew have been very understanding of like everyone in the Jam crew is into Doctor Who, for example, to a certain degree. So they were more than happy to play Doctor Who with me. But as I get more esoteric with this shit, I may have to tap other people as their patience runs out. So yeah. I did do something recently with Prowlers and Paragons that I'm not sure what the state of that is, but I really liked playing it. And that's the important part. I think at some point I'd like to give Honey Heist a try on a stream or in the podcast, just because it's a really fun system and the potential for shenanigans is very high. Every time I've played it, I've had a lot of fun. And it's also one of those situations where as a GM, you can just kind of create the scenario and then just set your players loose on it and not have to worry about them hitting certain plot points. You just create a problem and see how they solve it, which is very conducive to one-shots. Let's see what other RPG systems I have here. Hang on. Oh! I have a copy of the Leverage role-playing game, which is out of print, but I managed to find a rare copy. I want to do that at some point, just because I'm a huge Leverage nerd. I love the show, and I'd love to do a con and heist story that doesn't star bears. I do like doing a con and heist story that stars bears, but it does provide certain narrative limitations that are overcome by using a Leverage system. Saturn asks, it is quite fascinating watching Kit the player after listening so long to Kit the DM. Yeah, it's really... Here's the thing about me as a player is I usually end up playing very... my instinct is to play very sort of cautious, reserved characters who have a keen understanding of the situation around them. But unfortunately, Kit the human person wants chaos. And Kit the human person wins out in more scenarios than not. I am playing a character in another private game with my couple of friends from work, and that character is named Reese. He is an Azamar Ranger. He is a Beastmaster who has a stag named Swiggity Swag the Stag. He is a big dumb frat boy, and I love him so much. And my Canadian accent gets way worse when I play him, and that's a lot of fun. And his stupidity allows for it allows for me to satisfy my need for chaos. Troper 315 asks, do you have a favorite elemental plane? I like Isgard a lot. The concept is cool. I like Norse mythology, and that's where most of the Norse-ish gods are. I also like the Beastlands with all the animal gods. I think that's a lot of fun. I like Gehenna, but mostly because I like Yugoloths. I am one of the... Everyone has one thing in D&D that they love that nobody else likes, and for me, it's Yugoloths, especially Arcanoloths. I like Arcanoloths a lot. They're a lot of fun to play. Just because, like, lawful evil and chaotic evil, devils and demons, are both really, really motivated characters. Neutral evil, if you're a neutral evil creature in a setting like Planescape, then by default, everything you do will advance the cause of evil, whether you intend to or not, which kind of motivates you to do whatever. Because if it's all going to result in evil anyway, you can kind of just follow your whims. And that's a really fun character type to play. It's why I play shitbag characters so often, especially shitbag rogues. Do I have a favorite element? Oh, the question was elemental plane. The elemental planes don't appeal to me as much. I'm kind of tempted to say the quasi-elemental plane of ooze just to piss off specific people who are not watching this live stream. In terms of like having an elemental plane that's actually useful as a playable area, I would have to say either like air or earth. Just because they are not the planes where if you go there, you might die instantly. Like fire and water are both situations where if you have not prepared properly, you die on contact. And that's not a particularly useful campaign setting for me. Eats corn causes evil. Yeah. Listen, that corn was not ethically farmed, and therefore it's like the Good Place. The Good Place owes a lot to Planescape. I think. I don't think anyone on the Good Place writing staff watched Planescape, but they have a lot of things in common. A friend of mine once asked, "What if you tried to turn the Good Place into a D&D setting?" And I said, "It's called Planescape." There is a plane called the Outlands where you end up there if you were utterly neutral throughout your entire life, whether you like did not do anything good or bad significantly throughout your life, or whether you just kind of everything you did canceled out. Like you did so many good and evil things that they canceled out and you landed on the plane of ultimate neutrality, which is a hell of a thing and appeals to me a lot for reasons I don't fully understand. Shout outs to Planescape. Looking forward to y'all making it there. Yeah, I'm not sure I'll set it like primarily in Planescape, but there's certain quest objectives in the far, far future where they're going to need access to plane shift to get there. And I get to do interesting things with the parts of the planes that I enjoy. Love Honey Heist. Haven't been able to play it too often, but it's quite fun. It's really fun. Especially like when your players really get into the fact that you're a bear. I had one player who was playing a polar bear. Every other line out of his mouth was, "It's too damn hot," and it was hilarious every time. It might be because we were playing rather late at night on a Friday, and we were all a little punchy, especially about the fact that we were still at the office that late on a Friday, but it was a lot of fun. Any further questions? I'm not seeing much. So I figure it's 7:45. We booked this from 7 to 8, so I think we filled most of the hours, so I don't feel guilty about ending it early. So yeah, thanks to all 13 of wow, 13 is way more than I thought would show up for this thing, honestly. So thanks to all of you for coming out and listening to me ramble for 45 minutes straight. Or 48 minutes straight, I guess technically. So if you want to see more of these, mention it on the Discord or on the Patreon or on the Twitter. I don't check the Twitter. I'm not on Twitter anymore at all. But yeah, if it gets to a point in the campaign where you guys desperately want answers for some of the shit that has happened, which I'm sure will happen at some point, if only so you guys can yell at me. Feel free to do so. In the meantime, if you want to get in touch with me, I'm no longer on Twitter, but I am on Mastodon. My Mastodon is cybercyber.space/@inferior wit. I realize it's hard to navigate to. That's on purpose. Excuse me for a second. I'm learning that I should not have drunk a lot of pop before this live stream because I become incredibly burpy. And if I also have a blog at inferiorwit.dreamwith.org, so if you want to check that out, it's mostly me just rambling essays and posting links to fan fiction that if you don't have an AO3 account, you can't read. And I'm usually on the JEMJAMMER Discord if you want to come hang out there if you're not already. So yeah, thank you for joining me. You guys have a good rest of your night, and I will hopefully hear from you later. Bye-bye.